Let's see what the scholarship kid can do, Travis called out, his voice carrying across the auditorium. His friends snickered, phone cameras rising to capture what they assumed would be an epic humiliation. The microphone sailed through the air, thrown carelessly toward Lyric Taylor. She caught it with one hand, the cold metal shocking against her palm. Laughter erupted from the sea of Holloway Academy students, their pristine uniforms a stark contrast to her faded second-hand blazer. Lyric's heartbeat pounded against her ribs as she stood frozen in the back row. The scratch of expensive pens on premium paper halted as every student turned to stare. Ms. Bennett, the event organizer, offered a tight, uncomfortable smile from the stage. "Well, dear, we're waiting," she said, checking her watch. The amber spotlight swung wildly, finding Lyric in the darkness. The walk to the stage felt eternal, each footstep echoing against the marble floor. Students whispered as she passed, the soft rustle of their words like snakes in tall grass. The worn soles of her shoes squeaked against the polished surface, announcing her poverty with each step. Travis leaned toward his girlfriend Ashley, his voice carrying just enough for Lyric to hear as she climbed the stairs to the stage. "This should be hilarious," he said, a slight stutter betraying a crack in his perfect facade. The spotlight heat beat down on Lyric's face, sweat beading along her hairline. The smell of expensive cologne wafted from the front row, mixing with the lemon polish on the wooden stage. In the wings, true competitors in performance attire watched with a mixture of pity and disinterest. Lyric stood center stage now, the audience a blur of expectant faces. Travis folded his arms, a smirk playing on his lips as he waited for the inevitable crash and burn. His friends positioned their phones for the perfect angle to capture her humiliation. The microphone trembled in her hand. The auditorium fell into a hushed silence, the air heavy with anticipation. Lyric opened her mouth, and for a moment, nothing came. A boy in the third row coughed dramatically into his hand, triggering another wave of muffled laughter. In that moment, something shifted behind Lyric's eyes. The fear remained, but something harder, colder, settled alongside it. She stepped closer to the microphone, fingers tightening around the metal. What happens when you hand someone a weapon, thinking they don't know how to use it? The 5 a.m. alarm pierced the silence of the cramped apartment, vibrating against the wooden nightstand. Lyric's hand shot out from beneath the thin blanket, silencing it before it could wake her grandmother. She sat up, the worn mattress springs creaking beneath her as the darkness pressed against the single window. In the kitchenette, she organized her grandmother's pills into plastic containers, the rattle echoing in the pre-dawn quiet. "Morning, baby," her grandmother called, shuffling into the room in her faded robe. Her once strong frame had grown fragile, bent by years of work and now by illness. "You take these with food, Gram," Lyric reminded her, sliding a piece of toast across the counter. Her grandmother's hands trembled as she reached for the medication, the skin thin as tissue paper over blue veins. Outside, the diesel smell of the crosstown bus assaulted Lyric's senses as she climbed aboard. She pressed her forehead against the cool window, watching as the neighborhoods transformed from crumbling apartment buildings to manicured lawns and finally to the stone gates of Holloway Academy. The vibration of the engine traveled through the worn seat, a constant tremor that matched her underlying anxiety. The bus hissed to a stop. Lyric straightened her second-hand uniform one final time before descending the steps. The squeak of her shoes on the polished marble floors announced her arrival as she navigated the hallways. Students parted around her like water around a stone, eyes sliding past as if she were invisible. "Excellent analysis, Miss Taylor," her English teacher remarked, handing back an essay marked with an A. The praise came with the same distance as always, a clinical acknowledgement of her academic worth that never translated to actual connection. Behind her, a student whispered about her ghetto accent when she'd answered a question in class yesterday. Lyric's fingers curled around her pencil, but she said nothing. That evening, the community center hummed with energy, so different from the sterile halls of Holloway.
Bass vibrated through the floorboards as Lyric stepped onto the small stage, the taste of mint gum fresh in her mouth, her pre-performance ritual.
She clutched her mother's leather notebook, the pages worn smooth with use, filled with poems written in two different hands, her mother's elegant script and her own evolving style. "Midnight voice in the house," the host announced, and the crowd erupted. Here, she wasn't the scholarship kid or the girl from the wrong side of town. Here, she was legend. The words flowed from her like water breaking through a dam, her voice rising and falling in perfect rhythm, painting pictures of struggle and triumph that had the audience on their feet before she'd finished the first verse. When she stepped off stage, people clasped her hands, pulled her into hugs, saw her, really saw her. Later, alone in her room, Lyric stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror. "Why hide it?" she whispered to herself. But the answer came immediately, a cold knot of fear in her stomach. The recurring nightmare visited her again that night, standing on stage at Holloway, mouth open but throat closed, no sound emerging as laughter rose around her like floodwater. She woke gasping, the phantom sensation of drowning lingering in her chest. The next morning, a notice appeared on the school bulletin board. "Voices of Tomorrow competition, $50,000 scholarship prize." Students clustered around it, excitement buzzing. Lyric stood back, calculating in her head. The prize would cover her grandmother's medical bills, maybe even first and last month's rent on a new place. "Thinking of entering scholarship?" Travis's voice cut through her thoughts. "It's for real poets, not charity cases." His friends laughed on cue. That evening, she found the eviction notice tucked under their apartment door. "Luxury condominium conversion," it read. 45 days to vacate premises. The paper weighed heavy in her pocket as she folded and refolded it, the edges wearing thin from her nervous fingers. Her grandmother found her later, hunched over bills at the kitchen table. "What's wrong, baby?" Lyric smoothed the eviction notice on the table beside the medical bills. "Nothing I can't handle," she said, tucking her mother's notebook deeper into her bag. Some burdens weren't meant to be shared. "Spoken word lacks the sophistication of traditional poetic forms," Dr. Lawrence declared, pacing before the whiteboard in English literature. "It prioritizes performance over literary merit." Lyric's fingernails dug into her palm beneath her desk. She'd spent the previous night crafting a spoken word piece that addressed exactly this kind of dismissal. Words that challenged the artificial boundaries between high and low art. "It's basically just rap without music," Travis added from the front row, earning appreciative chuckles. "No offense to those who are into that sort of thing." His eyes flickered briefly to Lyric. Dr. Lawrence nodded thoughtfully. "An interesting perspective, Mr. Harrington." Lyric's hand hovered in the air, trembling slightly before she lowered it. Her notebook lay open on her desk, pages filled with the very art form being dismissed. The painful dig of her fingernails into her palm intensified as she restrained herself. In the cafeteria, Lyric balanced her tray of subsidized lunch, instantly recognizable by the plain white container rather than the premium options available to full-paying students. She found a seat at an empty table but remained within earshot of Travis and his friends. "My dad says the Voices of Tomorrow judges always pick someone from our school," Travis was saying, lounging in his chair with practiced ease. "It's tradition. I'm thinking about something classical for my piece. The judges eat that up." "What about that scholarship kid?" someone asked. "She was at the poetry slam." Travis snorted. "Please. They might have diversity quotas, but there's still a quality threshold. Some people just don't belong in certain spaces, you know? Their kind always tries, though." Lyric stiffened, her plastic fork freezing halfway to her mouth. "Speaking of which," Travis continued, his voice dropping conspiratorially, but then his eyes flicked up, catching Lyric watching them. His expression hardened. As Lyric stood to leave, Ashley swung her designer bag wide, knocking into Lyric's tray. The cafeteria food spread across the floor, the smell of institutional meatloaf and instant potatoes rising in a humid cloud. Laughter echoed off the tile walls. "Oops," Ashley said, not bothering to hide her smile. So clumsy of you. You should watch where you're going, Travis added, a slight stutter appearing as a teacher approached. Careful next time. That evening on the bus ride home, Lyric scrolled through her cracked phone screen, the broken corner catching on her thumb. Social media buzzed with posts about the upcoming competition. Keep Holloway's tradition of excellence alive. Hashtag Voices of Tomorrow. Hashtag Pure Poetry. Hope the judges remember what real talent looks like this year. Some people just want handouts. Sorry, not sorry. The comments beneath were worse, sprinkled with coded language that wasn't quite explicit enough to report, but clear in its message. People like her weren't welcome. The vibration of the bus engine through the worn seat matched her trembling hands as she closed the app. Home offered no respite. The apartment felt colder than usual, the building owner clearly cutting corners on heating now that the conversion was imminent. Lyric could see her breath misting in the bedroom she shared with her grandmother, whose coughing had grown worse in the chill. "I'm fine," her grandmother insisted, but the rattle in her chest told a different story. The calendar on the wall now had red circles marking the days until eviction, 30 days remaining. Medical bills piled up on the counter, their red final notice stamps like bloodstains on white paper. That night, Lyric sat at their small kitchen table, calculator in hand, trying to make impossible math work. Minimum wage job after school. Weekend shifts at the corner store. It still wasn't enough for the medical bills, let alone first and last month's rent on a new place. Maybe it was time to drop out. Get a full-time job. Let go of the Holloway dream that was costing more than it was giving. Her vision blurred as tears welled up, one dropping onto the eviction notice, smearing the ink. "Baby?" Her grandmother's voice came soft from the doorway. She shuffled forward, easing into the chair across from Lyric. Her hands, worn from decades of cleaning other people's homes, reached out to cover her granddaughter's. The familiar scent of cocoa butter lotion wrapped around Lyric like a blanket. "What's all this crying about?" she asked, though her eyes showed she already knew. "I'm thinking about leaving school," Lyric confessed. "We need money now, not later." Her grandmother's grip tightened, surprising strength in those thin fingers. "Your mother didn't work herself to the bone so you could drop out, and I didn't raise you to give up when things get hard. But Gram, no buts. Education is the one thing they can't take from you once you've got it. Everything else can be rebuilt." And Lyric nodded, not mentioning the poetry competition. What was the point? Some dreams weren't meant for girls like her. The tightness in her chest said what her voice couldn't. Some walls weren't meant to be scaled. Her grandmother cupped her face with one hand. "Promise me." "I promise," Lyric whispered, the words tasting like surrender. The community center vibrated with energy, the air thick with anticipation, and the lingering scent of fried food from the corner takeout. Lyric stood in the shadows offstage, rolling her shoulders back, inhaling deeply. Here, she wasn't Holloway's charity case. She was Midnight Voice, undefeated champion of the Southside Slam. "And now, the one you've been waiting for," the host announced, voice booming through speakers that had seen better days. "Give it up for Midnight Voice." The crowd erupted. Lyric stepped into the spotlight, her school uniform replaced by jeans and a black hoodie, the transformation complete. The familiar weight of the microphone settled in her palm, an extension of herself rather than a foreign object. She closed her eyes for a beat, then launched into her newest piece, a raw exploration of invisible barriers and the cost of silence. Words flowed like electricity, her voice rising and falling, body punctuating key phrases with precise movements. She wasn't reciting, she was conducting, each syllable a note in a symphony of resistance. They build their walls with whispers thinking silence is surrender, but what they don't understand is that some voices grow strongest in the dark. When she finished, the silence lasted a heartbeat before the room exploded. People leapt to their feet, the vibration of stomping feet creating a rhythm all its own. The taste of salt touched her lips, her own tears, unexpected but unstoppable. As the crowd pressed forward to congratulate her, Lyric spotted an unfamiliar face toward the back, a woman in her 30s with close-cropped hair and stylish glasses, watching intently. Something about her seemed familiar, but Lyric couldn't place her. Later, as Lyric slipped out the side door, the cool night air hit her face like a blessing after the overheated venue. She pulled her hood up, ready to make the journey home. Lyric? Or should I say, midnight voice? She whirled around to find the woman from the audience standing a few feet away, hands tucked into the pockets of a leather jacket. I'm not... Lyric stumbled over the words, heart pounding against her ribs. Relax, the woman said, her voice calm. I'm Ms. Diaz, the new librarian at Holloway. Lyric's stomach dropped. This was it. The end of her double life, maybe even her scholarship. Please don't what? Tell anyone that one of Holloway's students is the most talented spoken-word artist I've seen in years, Ms. Diaz stepped closer, her expression serious. That would be a crime. Lyric blinked, confusion replacing fear. I don't understand. Let me buy you a coffee, Ms. Diaz offered, gesturing to an all-night cafe across the street. I think we have a lot to talk about. The cafe smelled of old books and fresh coffee. Ms. Diaz apparently came here often enough that the barista started preparing her usual order as soon as they walked in. They settled into a corner booth, steam rising between them. I used to compete, Ms. Diaz said, stirring her coffee. Before I became a librarian, the national circuit mostly. You're a slam poet? Lyric couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. Ms. Diaz smiled. 3-time regional champion, but that was another life. She took a sip, studying Lyric over the rim of her mug. I recognized your voice months ago, you know. I've seen your videos online. Videos? Lyric's grip tightened on her cup. Nothing goes viral like authenticity. You've got quite a following for someone who performs with her hood up. Lyric's mind raced, calculating the damage. Are you going to tell the school? Ms. Diaz laughed. Tell them what? That one of their students is brilliant? That she's exactly the kind of talent the Voices of Tomorrow competition was designed to showcase? That competition isn't for people like me, Lyric said, the words bitter on her tongue. Who told you that? Travis Harrington and his echo chamber? Ms. Diaz leaned forward. The head judge this year is Carmen Rivera. She's a legend in slam poetry circles, champions voices that challenge the status quo. Hope flickered, dangerous and unwelcome. It doesn't matter. The registration deadline is tomorrow, Ms. Diaz finished for her. I brought the form. She pulled a folded paper from her jacket. The question is, will you enter as Midnight Voice or as Lyric Taylor? The form sat between them, blank and waiting. Lyric stared at it, her future contained in a single sheet of paper. What if I freeze? She whispered, voicing her deepest fear. What if I get up there and nothing comes out? Then you'll breathe and start again, Ms. Diaz said simply. But you won't freeze, not when it matters. Lyric reached for the pen, its weight unexpectedly heavy in her hand. Lyric Taylor, she said, pressing the pen to paper. It's time they learned my name. The library before regular hours was a different world, silent except for the hum of heating vents, morning sunlight filtering through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in golden beams. Lyric sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor, eyes closed, focusing on her breathing while Ms. Diaz paced around her. Again, Ms. Diaz instructed. From your diaphragm, not your throat. Lyric inhaled deeply, letting her stomach expand, then released the breath in a controlled stream, forming the vowels as Ms. Diaz had taught her. The exercises left her throat raw, but each day her voice grew stronger, more precise. Good, Miss Diaz nodded, checking her watch. We have 15 minutes before the first bell. Let's work on your stage presence.
They moved books aside, creating a makeshift stage between two reading tables. The smell of book dust rose with each movement, mingling with the morning sunlight in a scent Lyric had come to associate with possibility. "Own the space," Ms. Diaz demonstrated, her posture transforming as she stepped into the stage area. "Your body tells the story before your words do." Lyric mimicked the stance, shoulders back, chin lifted, a physical language of confidence she was still learning to speak. Ms. Diaz adjusted her elbow, tilted her chin a fraction higher. "Better. Remember, you're not asking for their attention, you're commanding it." Later that day, the competitor list for Voices of Tomorrow appeared on the school's online portal. Lyric's name, buried in the middle of 30 others, might have gone unnoticed if Travis hadn't been methodically analyzing the competition. "Seriously?" His voice carried across the computer lab. "They're letting anyone in this year." Heads turned, including Lyric's. Travis's gaze locked with hers, recognition and then contempt flashing across his features. "What's the matter, scholarship? Hoping for another handout?" The familiar stutter was carefully controlled, practiced away, but Lyric could hear the effort it cost him. She said nothing, returning to her work, but the damage was done. By lunchtime, whispers followed her through the halls, the echo of conversations cutting off as she approached. After school, she discovered her backpack missing from her locker. She found it an hour later in a bathroom stall, the contents soaked with water, including her mother's notebook, the pages warped and bleeding ink. Lyric carefully separated each page, laying them on paper towels to dry, stomach tight with fury and grief. The next day, someone had scrawled "charity case" across her locker in black marker. The day after that, rumors circulated that she had only been accepted into the competition because of diversity requirements. "Don't engage," Ms. Diaz advised during their morning session. "They're trying to get in your head. Keep your focus on the work." But focus became increasingly difficult. The eviction countdown had reached 15 days. Her grandmother's new medication caused dizziness, requiring Lyric to help her to the bathroom at night. Her weekend job cut her hours due to slow business. The persistent headache that had started behind her eyes spread to her temples and down her neck, a crown of pressure that never fully lifted. One night, after helping her grandmother to bed, Lyric caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror, dark circles like bruises beneath her eyes, skin dull with exhaustion. Her vision blurred at the edges as she gripped the sink, the cold porcelain anchoring her as the room seemed to tilt. The next morning, she missed her alarm, then the bus. By the time she arrived at school, first period was half over. Ms. Diaz waited in the library for their practice session, but Lyric walked past the doors, heading instead for the second-floor girls' bathroom, the one furthest from classrooms, rarely used. She locked herself in the last stall, sank to the floor, and finally let the tears come. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a grating counterpoint to her muffled sobs. The bathroom door squeaked open. Footsteps approached, pausing outside her stall. "Lyric?" Ms. Diaz's voice was gentle but firm. "Open the door." "I can't do this," Lyric said, voice thick. "It's too much." A sigh from the other side. "Then don't." Lyric looked up, surprised. "What?" "Don't do it. Walk away. Let them win. Let Travis take the prize and the glory. Let Holloway continue thinking people like you don't belong in spaces like that." Anger flared, cutting through the despair. "That's not fair." "None of this is fair," Ms. Diaz agreed. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" The lock clicked as Lyric opened the door. Ms. Diaz stood waiting, arms crossed. "You know what the hardest part of performing is?" Ms. Diaz asked. "It's not the audience or the competition. It's the voice in your head telling you that you're not good enough, that you don't deserve to be heard." Lyric nodded, recognizing the truth in the words. "That voice is lying," Ms. Diaz continued. And the only way to prove it wrong is to speak louder than it does. She held out her hand. Ready to get back to work? That evening, they developed a new strategy. Lyric would start her preliminary performance with exactly what the judges expected. Safe, traditional, forgettable. A wolf in sheep's clothing. Give them what they expect, Ms. Diaz explained. Then shatter those expectations when it matters most. Lyric nodded, understanding the plan. She sipped the honey and lemon tea Ms. Diaz had prepared, the warm liquid soothing her practiced throat. Opening her mother's notebook, now mostly recovered from the water damage, Lyric turned to a particular poem near the back, one she'd read 100 times but never performed. The words in her mother's handwriting seemed to pulse with life on the page. This one, she said, her finger tracing the lines. This is how I'll finish. The Wakefield Center for the Arts rose like a glass and stone mountain in downtown's cultural district, its reflecting pools capturing the afternoon sun in blinding flashes. Lyric stood before it, dwarfed by its grandeur, clutching her mother's notebook to her chest. I'm here, Mom, she whispered to the air. Her grandmother had been too weak to come, the new medication leaving her dizzy and exhausted. Lyric had helped her back to bed that morning, promising to call the moment it was over. Inside, the lobby buzzed with activity, competitors checking in, organizers rushing about with clipboards, audience members filtering toward the auditorium. The overwhelming smell of different perfumes and colognes created an invisible cloud that made Lyric's eyes water. A massive screen displayed the live stream setup, currently showing the empty stage and filling seats. Voices of. Tomorrow trended on social media. This wasn't just a school competition, it was a city-wide event broadcast for anyone with an internet connection. Travis and his entourage arrived in a burst of noise and movement. They carried equipment bags, bottled water, and an air of entitlement that parted the crowd before them. Travis himself wore a tailored blazer, hair perfectly styled, exuding practiced confidence. Backstage, the preparation area hummed with nervous energy. Competitors paced, mumbled their pieces under breath, did vocal warm-ups, or sat in intense concentration. Lyric found a corner, away from the others, and sat cross-legged on the floor, her mother's notebook open in her lap. Diversity entries really dilute the pool, Travis's voice carried clearly, deliberately loud. It's like they care more about checking boxes than actual talent. His friends nodded in agreement, casting sideways glances at Lyric and the two other black competitors. Last year's winner was from Riverside Prep, one of them added. It's basically a tradition for private schools to dominate this thing. Lyric closed her eyes, focusing on her breathing as Ms. Diaz had taught her. In, hold, out. The voices receded, becoming background noise to her own heartbeat. 15 minutes to curtain, the stage manager called, clipboard in hand. Competitors, please find your assigned waiting areas. The competition structure was announced to the audience. 3 rounds with eliminations. Preliminary round for all 30 competitors, second round for the top 10, final round for the top 3. Judges would score based on content, delivery, originality, and audience response. From her position in the wings, Lyric watched the early performances. Most were technically proficient, but safe. Metaphors about nature, reflections on classic literature, meditations on growing up. The audience responded with appropriate appreciation, polite applause punctuating each conclusion. Travis performed 8th, taking the stage with casual confidence. His piece, titled Excellence, explored the pursuit of perfection through carefully constructed verses about mountain climbing. It was polished, precisely delivered, and utterly predictable. The audience applauded enthusiastically, particularly the Holloway section. Lyric was 23rd. As her turn approached, the familiar tightness gripped her chest, the old fear threatening to return. She closed her eyes, grounding herself in sensory awareness as Ms. Diaz had taught her. The subtle vibration of voices through the floorboards, the smell of dust and electrical equipment, the taste of mint from her pre-performance gum. Next, From Holloway Academy, Lyric Taylor. She stepped into the spotlight, feeling its artificial warmth against her skin. The audience stretched before her, faces indistinct beyond the first few rows. A murmur rippled through the crowd, the scholarship student, followed by expectant silence. The microphone stood waiting at center stage.
Lyric approached it slowly, deliberately. Her fingers wrapped around the stand, the metal cool against her skin. She leaned in, the subtle vibration of the microphone against her lips amplifying her heartbeat through the speakers. "Opportunity," she began, her voice modulated and controlled, "is a door that stands before us all." What followed was exactly what they expected. A safe, conventional meditation on gratitude and hard work. Her delivery was competent but unremarkable, her body language appropriately restrained. She made eye contact with no one, keeping her gaze just above the audience. The applause afterward was polite but tepid. The judges' faces revealed nothing as they marked their scorecards. Lyric exited stage left, passing Travis in the wings. "Nice try," he whispered, smirking. "Better luck next year." When the preliminary results were announced, Lyric's name was the last called for advancement to the second round, barely making the cut. Travis, unsurprisingly, had scored near the top. The second round began after a short intermission. The competition intensified, performers taking greater risks with content and delivery. The audience responded in kind, their energy shifting from polite attention to genuine engagement. Travis performed third in this round, his confidence even more pronounced after his preliminary success. His piece, titled "Against the Current," portrayed his speech impediment as a metaphor for overcoming life's obstacles. It was a calculated move, personal enough to seem vulnerable, but framed as triumph over adversity. "Though my tongue may sometimes betray me," he delivered, deliberately including the stutter for effect, "my spirit never will." The audience's reaction was powerful, many rising to their feet at his conclusion. The judges nodded approvingly, one leaning to whisper to another. Travis exited the stage with a satisfied smile, pausing briefly in the wings where Lyric waited. "That's how it's done," he said, not bothering to keep his voice down. Lyric was eighth and final in the second round. As she took the stage again, she could feel the energy had changed. The audience was restless, having already seen what they considered the highlight of the round. A few people checked their phones. The judges straightened their scorecards. She approached the microphone slowly, just as before. Her hand reached up to adjust the stand, but this time she removed the microphone entirely, stepping away from the fixed position. "Opportunity," she began, in the same controlled voice as her first performance, "is a door that stands before us all." The first 30 seconds matched her preliminary performance almost exactly. The same words, the same delivery. Faces in the audience began to show polite disinterest. Then, mid-sentence, Lyric stopped. The abrupt silence drew all eyes back to her. She stood perfectly still for 3 heartbeats. When she spoke again, her voice had transformed, deeper, more resonant, flowing with the rhythmic cadence of spoken word. "But some doors are locked from the inside and some keys are never meant for hands like mine." The shift was electric. She moved across the stage with fluid purpose, her body becoming part of the narrative, her voice rising and falling with practiced precision. This wasn't a student reciting a poem. This was midnight voice commanding attention. "You speak of current and tide as if you've ever been swept under, as if you've ever had to breathe through water filled with other people's expectations, assumptions, limitations." The audience's collective intake of breath was audible, a subtle change in air pressure that Lyric could feel against her skin. In the front row, the judges sat forward, pens forgotten in their hands. "Invisible barriers aren't for your protection, they're for mine, because what scares you most isn't that I might fail, but that I might succeed in a world that promised you would always be ahead of me." Her final lines landed like stones dropped in still water, the ripples spreading outward through the silent auditorium. For a moment after she finished, no one moved, no one breathed.
Then the applause broke like a thunderclap, starting in the back and rolling forward in a wave. People rose to their feet, some calling out in appreciation. Even some of the Holloway students, caught in the moment, joined the ovation. In the wings, Travis stood with his mouth slightly open, the control he prided himself on momentarily forgotten. The finalists were announced after deliberation: Travis, Lyric, and a girl from Eastside High School named Danny. The atmosphere backstage crackled with tension. Travis's supporters huddled around him, casting wary glances at Lyric. The social media feed displayed on monitors showed the live stream exploding with comments, the hashtag #MidnightVoice gaining traction alongside the official competition tag. 3 minutes to final round, the stage manager called. Finalists to positions. The increased tension made the air feel electrically charged as the final round began. Travis performed first, taking the stage with slightly less swagger than before. His piece, more aggressive than his previous offerings, was titled Natural Order. It explored the concept of meritocracy through metaphors of predator and prey, thinly veiling implications about who naturally rose to the top and who remained beneath. Some are born to lead the pride, others to follow in shadows. This isn't cruelty, but design. Nature's wisdom knows who belongs where. As he delivered the closing lines, his eyes flicked to the wings where Lyric waited. For a split second, his rhythm faltered, the practiced flow hitching almost imperceptibly. The audience responded with strong applause, though something had shifted, a subtle change in energy, like air before a storm. Danny performed second, her piece about environmental justice earning enthusiastic response. Then it was Lyric's turn. She stood in the wings, waiting for her name. Ms. Diaz appeared beside her, squeezing her shoulder once. "Remember," she whispered, "they're not giving you the stage. You're taking it." Our final competitor from Holloway Academy, Lyric Taylor. Lyric walked to center stage, her steps measured and deliberate. The spotlight found her, wrapping her in its glow. Without hesitation, she shrugged off her Holloway blazer, revealing a worn T-shirt beneath. The community center logo faded but visible across the front. Murmurs rippled through the audience. In the front row, the judges exchanged glances. Lyric opened her mother's notebook to the marked page, feeling the well-worn paper between her fingers. These words had waited years to be spoken. She raised the microphone and began. "My mother wrote this poem the day before she died," she said simply. "I've never shared it until now." The auditorium fell completely silent. Lyric closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them, looking directly at the audience for the first time. "They will tell you to be grateful for scraps when you deserve a feast. They will tell you to whisper when you were born to shout. They will measure your worth by standards they invented to ensure you come up short." Her voice filled the space, reaching every corner of the auditorium without strain. Years of practice at the community center, of finding power without amplification, now served her on the professional stage. But baby girl, remember this. Your existence is not a debt you owe the world. Your voice is not a privilege they can revoke. Your talent is not a gift they bestowed upon you. These things are birthright. These things are blood and bone. These things are yours to claim. As she continued, something remarkable happened. People began to stand, first a few in the back, then more throughout the auditorium, until a wave of rising bodies swept toward the stage. The standing ovation began before she had finished, growing in intensity with each line. When she delivered the final words, her voice rang clear above the applause that had already begun to swell. So when they hand you the microphone, thinking you don't know how to use it, show them that your voice was never the one that needed amplification. The roar that followed seemed to lift the roof. People stamped their feet, clapped until their hands hurt, some wiping tears from their cheeks. The live stream comments scrolled too quickly to read, a blur of exclamation points and praise. In that moment, standing center stage with her mother's words still hanging in the air, Lyric knew the outcome before it was announced. Some victories transcend scores and judges' decisions.
Some moments redefine what winning means. The judges didn't deliberate long. Their whispered conference lasted barely 2 minutes before the head judge, Carmen Rivera, approached the microphone. The audience settled gradually, the energy in the room still electric, vibrating with anticipation.
"Before I announce our decision," Rivera began, her voice carrying the weight of 20 years in poetry circles, "I want to thank all our finalists for reminding us why this competition exists. Voices of Tomorrow was created to discover exactly what we witnessed today: authentic talent that changes the conversation." Travis stood on one side of the stage, hands clasped behind his back, smile fixed in place. Danny stood on the other side, her expression serene regardless of outcome. Lyric remained center stage, her mother's notebook held against her chest, its weight both familiar and profound. "The decision of the judges is unanimous," Rivera continued. "The winner of this year's Voices of Tomorrow competition and recipient of the $50,000 scholarship is Lyric Taylor from Holloway Academy." The audience erupted again, the sound crashing against the walls like a physical force. Lyric stood motionless, processing the words as Rivera approached with the certificate. The weight of the award in her hands felt heavier than expected, as if it contained not just paper but possibility. In the wings, Ms. Diaz wiped tears from behind her glasses. On stage, Danny stepped forward to offer a genuine hug of congratulation. Travis approached last, his expression carefully composed. "Congratulations," he said, the words stripped of warmth. "Quite the performance. I guess diversity initiatives work sometimes." Lyric met his gaze steadily. "I heard you," she replied, her voice quiet enough that only he could hear. "Now everyone heard me." His smile faltered as she turned away. Backstage was chaos. Reporters from local news stations, competition organizers with follow-up paperwork, fellow competitors offering congratulations. Lyric's phone vibrated continuously in her pocket, notifications flooding in faster than she could process them. Ms. Diaz appeared at her side, creating a buffer between Lyric and the press. "Your piece is trending," she said, showing Lyric her phone screen. The video had already been clipped, shared, and reshared thousands of times. Midnight Voice and #Lyric Taylor competed for top trending spot in the city. "I need to call my grandmother," Lyric said, the enormity of the moment finally hitting her. Her hands trembled as she dialed, tears blurring her vision. "Graham? We did it. We won." The weight that had pressed against her shoulders for months. The eviction notice, the medical bills, the daily indignities at school began to lift. Not disappearing entirely, but shifting, becoming manageable. "They want you for interviews," Ms. Diaz said after Lyric ended the call. "And there's already talk of a feature in the arts section of the Tribune." "Can it wait until tomorrow?" Lyric asked. "I need to get home to my grandmother, Ms." Diaz nodded, understanding. "I'll drive you." The next morning, Lyric's performance had spread far beyond the city. National arts blogs picked up the story. Unknown student poet stuns at regional competition. Clips appeared on morning shows, commentators discussing not just her talent, but the powerful social commentary embedded in her mother's words. At Holloway, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Students who had never acknowledged Lyric's existence now smiled in greeting. Teachers who had been cordial but distant suddenly found time for conversation. Principal Whitman himself stopped her in the hallway to offer congratulations on behalf of the entire Holloway community. Travis and his friends maintained distance. Their former confidence diminished. The power dynamic hadn't just tilted, it had inverted completely. A month later, Lyric and her grandmother moved into a small but clean apartment closer to both Holloway and the hospital. The scholarship covered not just college expenses, but provided a stipend that addressed the immediate financial crisis. Her grandmother's medical bills were paid, a new treatment plan established with a specialist who actually listened. The invitation came on embossed cardstock. The National Youth Poetry Summit wanted Lyric as a featured performer. Your voice represents exactly the kind of authentic talent we seek to elevate, the letter read, both as Lyric Taylor and as the artist formerly known as Midnight Voice. Ms. Diaz smiled when Lyric showed her the invitation in the library. Are you surprised? A little, Lyric admitted. I never thought winning one competition would change so much. It wasn't just winning, Ms. Diaz pointed out. It was how you won. You changed the narrative. That evening, Lyric sat at her desk in the new apartment, a blank page open in her mother's notebook. The pages were nearly filled now, her mother's handwriting giving way to her own, a conversation across time. She touched the leather cover, worn smooth with use. Outside, the city continued its rhythmic pulse. Inside, Lyric began to write, her pencil moving across fresh paper, creating new rhythms, new stories. The victory had changed things, opened doors, created opportunities. But the work, the real work, continued. Her phone pinged with a notification. The community center was launching a youth poetry program and wanted her to lead it. Another ping followed, an email from a publisher interested in discussing a collection of her work. The world had expanded, offering possibilities that once seemed impossible. But Lyric understood what many young talents never learned. The moment of recognition wasn't the destination. It was merely the beginning. Her grandmother peeked into the room. Still writing, baby? Lyric nodded, not looking up from the page. Always. Your mother would be proud, her grandmother said softly before closing the door. In the quiet of her room, Lyric continued crafting her next piece. The competition was over, the immediate battle won, but her voice had more to say, more barriers to break, more stories to tell. I found my voice, she whispered to herself, the words becoming the first line of a new poem. Now I need to keep using it. Some walls weren't meant to be accepted. They were meant to be broken. And having broken through one, Lyric Taylor was just getting started. Have you ever felt underestimated, just waiting for your moment to shine? For more powerful stories of triumph over adversity like Lyric's journey, subscribe to Beat Stories now. Every week, we bring you gripping tales of underdogs who rise against all odds, using their hidden talents to flip the script and claim their rightful place. These aren't just stories. They're emotional journeys that will leave you inspired, moved, and ready to embrace your own hidden strengths. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join our community of viewers who believe in the power of authentic voices. Like this video if Lyric's story resonated with you, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that their voice matters too.
Behind every headline is a human story. At Beat Stories, we go deeper, where emotion meets evidence and drama reveals the system. If this story made you pause, reflect, or feel something, don't forget to subscribe. There's more to come.